I'm Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm providing some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literary and cultural studies. In this installment, I'll say some things about the Old English epic poem, Beowulf. Traditional epic poems were songs sung in praise of kings and other military leaders. These epics were passed down from generation to generation and held in the memories of the poets or bards who sang them at ceremonial occasions. These poems served both an historical function for their communities in which literacy was not widespread, and also the ideological function of legitimizing the authority of the ruler. Traditional epic poems are sometimes called oral epics or primary epics in order to distinguish them from written or secondary epics like Virgil's Aeneid or Milton's Paradise Lost. Secondary or literary epics use many of the conventions of the oral epics, but they were composed at later dates in literate communities by single authors who develop distinctive individual styles that are fixed by the act of writing. Beowulf is considered to be the first post-classical European epic. That is, Beowulf is the oldest surviving European epic composed after the classical Greek and Roman epics of Homer and Virgil. Beowulf survives because it was written down at around the year 1000, although it must have existed in oral performance long before that. Beowulf was not published until the 19th century, and even then it was considered to be primarily of antiquarian historical interest, rather than a work of distinctive literary merit. One distinctive feature of studying an anonymously composed oral epic like Beowulf is that the concept of authorship will have much less importance than it does in the study of a typical piece of modern literature. In our modern post-romantic conception of literature, the individual expression of the author's experience, the author's inspiration, typically takes on great importance, but not so much in the study of an oral epic. Consider, for example, the case of the ancient Greek poet Homer, considered by many to have practically invented the epic. We're not even sure when he lived. Some classical writers thought that Homer lived in the 9th century before the Common Era, while some scholars believe that he lived 3 centuries before that. Some scholars believe that the name Homer originally refers to one distinctive individual voice, while other scholars believe that the name designates a group of poets. At any rate, whatever might be said of the conditions at the time of original composition of epic poems like the Iliad and the Odyssey, by the time we read them, these poems have passed down from bard to bard over many generations, each bard learning the poems, memorizing them, singing them, passing them on to the next poet of the next generation. These poems must have changed over the centuries, being transmitted in this way. Beowulf, too, would have been passed down from generation to generation. The events described in the poem would have occurred before the year 600 of the Common Era, but the poem was not written down in the form that we have it until around the year 1000. This image shows the only original surviving manuscript from that period. The manuscript is held in the British Museum. Even though the poem is written in Old English, the characters and the territories in which they live are on the continent. This modern map of northwestern Europe shows where the people mentioned in Beowulf were from and where the events would have taken place. That is, not in England, but in the lands of modern Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. This map shows the areas and the populations mentioned in the poem: Jutland and Sweden, the land of the Danes, the Jats, and the Swedes. The poem begins with a short listing of some Danish royal genealogy. I'll read a few lines in our modern translation from the beginning of the poem. So the Spear Danes in days of old were led by a lord famed for his forays. We heard of that prince's power and prowess. Often shield-chefing ambushed enemies, took their mead benches, mastered their troops. Though first he was found forlorn and alone, his early sorrows were swiftly consoled. He grew under heaven, grew to a greatness renowned among men of neighboring lands. His rule recognized over the whale road. Danegeld granted him. That was a good king. Afterward God gave him an heir, a lad in the hall to lighten all hearts. The Lord had seen how long and sorely Denmark had languished for lack of a leader. Beowulf was blessed with boldness and honor. Throughout the north his name became known. A soldierly son should strive in his youth to do great deeds, give generous gifts, and defend his father. Then in old age, when strife besets him, his comrades will stand and his folk follow. Through fair dealing a prince shall prosper in any kingdom. Still hail on the day ordained for his journey, Shield went to dwell with the world's warder. His liegemen bore his bier to the beach. So he had willed while wielding his words as lord of the land, beloved by all. With frost on its fittings, a lordly longboat rode in the harbor, ring-bowed and ready. They propped their prince, the gold-giver, in the hollow hull, heaped with treasures, the famous man at the foot of the mast. No ship ever sailed more splendidly stocked with war weapons, arms, and armor. About his breast the booty was strewn, keepsakes soon to be claimed by the sea. So he was sent as a child chosen to drift on the deep. Now the Danes granted treasures no less than those they had taken, and last they hoisted high overhead a golden banner as they gave the great one back to the Baltic with heavy hearts and mournful minds. No man can say, though clever in council or strong under sky, who might have landed that shipload of loot. But the son of Shield was hailed in the strongholds after the father had fared far away, and he long ruled the lordly shieldings. A son was born unto Beowulf also, proud Healfdene, who held his high seat, battle-hardened and bold in old age. 4 offspring descended from Healfdene, awake in the world: Hrothgar, Hrothgar, kindly Halga. I have heard that the 4th was Onela's queen, and slept with the sovereign of haughty Swedes. Hrothgar was granted swiftness for battle and staunchness in strife. Friends and kinfolk followed him freely. His band of young soldiers swelled to a swarm. In his mind he mulled, commanding a mead hall, higher than humankind ever had heard of, and offering everyone, young and old, all he could give that God had granted, save common land and the commoners' lives. Then, I am told, he tackled that task, raising the rafters with craftsmen summoned from many kingdoms across Middle-earth. Each day, one evil dweller in darkness spitefully suffered the din from that hall, where Hrothgar's men made merry with mead. Harp-strings would sound, and the song of the shop would recount the tales told of time past, whence mankind had come, and how the Almighty had fashioned the world with its fair fields set in wide waters, with sun and moon lifted on high, and lighting the land for earth's first dwellers, with forests everywhere, branching and blooming, with life breathing in all kinds of creatures. Shield-chefing, by the way, is the mythic founder of the Danish royal line. Shield means shield or protection, hence the military association, and chefing means sheaf, as in a sheaf of wheat. This suggests an early association in Norse mythology with a pagan god of vegetation. Shield-chefing is also a foundling or orphan, like many other traditional or mythological heroes, including Moses and King Arthur. This is where I'll stop for today, but I'll have more to say about the opening of the poem in a subsequent webcast. As always, if you have questions or comments, please send me an email.